You really can. One of the things we find is when teachers teach the same thing for 3 or 4 years or more straight, you actually have creativity, intellect, atrophy. So I'm going to ask you to really feed that part of your soul, your teacher self, is that you really build your own creative self so you can see those possibilities. Now, already, some of you might be realizing this, but I'll just make sure it's very clear. If I come in and suggest this kind of divergent thinking and you don't have a big repertoire of responses, then this is going to feel very threatening to you. And you might get defensive and like, well, I don't know if I buy what Rick is saying, or selling, so to speak. So I need to remind you that I should be able to come to you and say, hey, what are 9 different ways to teach this? Or what are 10 different ways to assess this? And if that freaks you out, like there's only 2, I can only think of 2, then that's the sign. Bill Engvall, the comedian, there's your clue, kind of thing. That maybe I need to spend more time cultivating my creative soul. And I wrote an article on that, I have slides on that, I will train you on that if you want. But we find the very best teachers are very comfortable thinking divergently and not just perpetuating the status quo all the time. There are some teachers who laminate their lesson plans and teach the same thing for 25 years. Lamination is where you put plastic on it. I know some of you know that. It kind of went away with ditto and mimeograph. Some of you have no idea what I just said. Go home. Anyway, no, not really. But I want to realize I teach a different group of kids every year, not the same group of kids. And I'm a seasoned veteran. So I might get a new group of kids. I don't have any experience with that. So I'm going to ask other people, what advice do you have? Because I'm really struggling with this. That's natural. Not, oh no, nobody can find out I'm kind of weak with this one class. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm a seasoned veteran. You should know better. I can't possibly know everything about every single kid and about new brain stuff in the world of cognitive psychology. And you're right, you can. But can you constantly feed yourself on those things? Yes, you can. And try to improve. So I am asking you to really think about how your instruction responds to what you know about children. You don't teach blind to the children you serve. It's not in a void. So I stop you cold and I say, hey, tell me something about Lakeisha, Iqbal, and David, and Karen, and tell me how you changed your instruction as a result of that knowledge to improve it over that which otherwise could have been achieved. This is that world of equity and responsive teaching and differentiation. These are some of their contexts. So remind yourself, if you'll bounce right through at least half of those, the context within which you and the kids are navigating. And looking at the pictures, yes, some kids have after-school chores and duties, even young ones. And yes, some of the times their parents have been injured in war. And yes, sometimes the mom or the dad has cancer. And you're still holding on to every single moment with them. There's lots and lots and lots going on, and I'm not blind to that. So I remind you, this is the actual original quote from the Vietnamese monk. Some people have butchered this over the time, but this is the original quote. Take a look, remind yourself of its sentiment. So I'm going to look at a child who's failing to thrive, and I'm thinking about the fertilizer in the soil, the nutrients in the soil. Do I need more sun? Do I need more water? Move them out of the wind. I'm going to think about institutional things that are diminishing them or preventing them, not just individual decisions they make. It's a whole big ecosystem to figure this out. It's not just like, I need to find blame someplace, which for some teachers might mean they deflect. Not all, but some might do that. So take a look how I lined up all my children according to Hugh. Isn't it beautiful? Yes, and look how I have them all drawing straight parallel lines right next to each other. I am such a remarkable teacher. I am so good at iron fist classroom management. Woohoo! This is a teacher who's really going to struggle with lots of things because the world isn't so orderly like this. All of us, even the messiest of us, we tend to like an orderly, sequential schematic. I do this first, and you're with me here. I do this, and then you follow me here. And then I do this, and now you're totally prepared for this. Woo, what a beautiful sequence. I love teaching. Why do people think it's so stressful? It's really not. What? It's beautiful, but this is what learning really looks like. It's messy. And as you see in the comments left and right, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity and this indecisiveness from time to time. So imagine this. A child takes a quiz or does some kind of assessment and bombs it. It's like a 0. It's awful, right? But then, that was a skill in isolation, content in isolation. He just didn't get it. I don't know, you're not creative that day, he's not ready to receive school. Whatever it is, doesn't get it. But then 5 weeks later, you do something with meaningful context where you have to employ that skill or that content now in this new thing. Well, that kid suddenly gets it. You were creative that day, he was ready to receive school, he was more mature, I don't know. He, woo, gets it. But he didn't have it here. Is this a permanent rendering? No. It was one moment in time status check. So the kid didn't get it on this part of the timeline, but he got it on this part of the timeline. You know what that's called? It's a moment of hallelujah. This is where we love this to happen. So this kid gets full credit. He gets an A. I literally go back and change that A. Or I leave the historical record because I want to see the progression of growth, but I only look at the A when I'm looking at the final report card or the final transcripts. Oh, so it's not a uniform timeline. No, it's not. When I taught kindergarten, that very first year I taught, I'm 6'3" and I weigh about 225 pounds. So basically they saw me as a climbing tree. But at any rate, oh, there's Mr. Wormeli, let's climb him. Anyway, so I had kids walking into my class who were already reading Ramona Quimby, Ralph S. Mouse, and Amelia Bedelia, and laughing at the humor. This is before Miss Nelson went missing and there was no magic treehouse, I'm just saying. So it's way back in the day, 1980, we were talking about. And this, I was thinking about, hey, let's get a whole box set of how to eat fried worms and bottles of ketchup. That was written by Thomas Rockwell, who was the son of Norman Rockwell. Thomas Rockwell was the guy who was the boy in Norman Rockwell's paintings. Have you ever seen his paintings? He just died last year. He was 91. I just thought I would offer that to you. It's a loss. He was a children's author. How to Eat Fried Worms is one of his books. Well, at any rate, we're going through and do this stuff. And so they're reading at that level, 2nd, 3rd grade level. And I think my battery's going in and out. I'm not sure. Yeah. And that's the meaning of life. Thank you. At any rate, I'm going to let Uncle Don fix me here. You broke it already? I did. I already did that one over each. So, at any rate, I also had kids coming in who were really unfamiliar with the alphabet. And so I said, okay, what do I do? Because like, what I was doing was, this week is the letter G. Let's look at G words. And that's where they were developmentally. And so she said what you see on the screen. Rick, kids are popcorn. They pop at different rates. It's okay. They pop at different rates. So you might have some, whoa, there we go. Oh, hi, this is my real voice. Welcome everybody, it's going to be a Disney morning. Anyway, so I realized that I got kids up there and kids down there. They pop at different rates, and she said, yeah, if they pop later or they pop earlier, which means they master things, they learn things later or earlier, it doesn't mean they're lesser souls because they popped in a different timeline. So I want you to imagine the skillet, not a bag you put in the microwave oven and proceed to stink up the whole faculty lounge. People, you know who you are. I'm talking about, I'm going to make popcorn in a skillet with oil and kernels, okay? And the first one pops. And I'm like, whoa, I should work in a movie theater. It's so perfectly formed. This is great. How about the rest of you? What are you, bashful? I want some early poppage, or premature poppature, whatever you want to. Come on, let's get going. What's going on? 2 minutes goes by, and I finally get all the kernels to pop. That's great. They all get the same right to be eaten by me, covered in salt and butter. Oh, yes. I don't deny them. No, you pop later. You are not popcorn. So imagine I get the neighborhood toddlers together. Come, children, gather on my grass. Some of you on that side of the driveway, some of you on that side of the driveway. What? All right, here we go. All of you, get over here. JJ, you go stand on the far side over there. All right, you all learn to walk at 10 months, 3rd week, 2nd day. You are walkers. You have freedoms, rights, privileges granted to the achieved, to the walking hood. You, JJ, took another 2 weeks. I know you can walk now, but it took you 2 weeks after their timeline, so you are a non-walker. You have to sign up for Uber and Lyft if it comes this far out in our community. You have no freedoms, credits, rights, privileges granted to the walking hood because you didn't do it in the same arbitrary, uniform timeline. Remember that time is not immutable. Time is a variable. Popcorn kernels pop at different rates, just like children learn different rates. So you are never to be beholden to a uniform timeline. That's radical. I'm basically saying you need, from time to time in this diocese, to be gently insubordinate. I said gently. What? I'm never going to be invited back again. The idea is, what if you learned it faster than somebody else? I don't admire you that and just babysit you. I do something different with you that's very substantive. What if it took you a whole nother quarter or marking period to learn something? Great! The grade book is cumulative for the year. I don't know if you're aware of this, but every federal and state agency, every legal body in the United States, where if parents were ever to complain or the diocese was ever to get called into a trial, you need to understand something. The only thing that's a report card is the end of the year transcript. The things we sent home every 9 weeks or 12 weeks or 16 weeks, those are called interim reports or progress reports. They're not report cards. So I have the entire year to teach you this year's worth of stuff. And if the kids are at different rates, no problem. You're not going to be immature and more irresponsible because you learned at a different timeline than somebody else. Stop hiding behind an arbitrary timeline. This is one of the biggest hurdles to get over when it comes to grading. Well, wait, they all have to be proficient by this one calendar date, February 15th, on this particular test, NWA, EA, or whatever it might be, or a state exam. That's politically motivated, not pedagogically sound. So if I have a standardized test, it means that I can take that data and use it diagnostically, never punitively. Never as a final judgment or the sole diagnostic. It's always in conjunction with other things. But this idea that, no, I have to get you here. And if I don't get you here by this one date, then tomorrow is a mess. Then tomorrow is a mess. You're an adult. Do more than one trick, and you're highly accomplished. You can totally do that. Now, we try to be orderly, and most kids can follow that order. But for those outliers who can't, are you just going to say, oh, well, stinks to be you, we're moving on? No, because you're decent, compassionate, conscientious people. You're going to say, all right, we got to move on, but I want to work with you in many lessons on the side to get you there. Or you're going to do this. It's just one of those nice-to-know things. I'm going to let it go, let it go. Because this other stuff is more indicative, and we're just so much more pertinent, pivotal, leveraging to what we're going to do. Oh, yeah. So I'm not going to hide behind the timeline. Well, I just spoke for like 4 minutes on that. This is what I get from a lot of teachers who hear that kind of talk. Does it look familiar? Maybe you've thought it from time to time, or you know colleagues who might. Yeah. You know what's going on here? They have a childish notion of fairness. Because they've been teaching kids so much, they kind of succumbed to their notion of it. What? They thought fair meant same or equal. It doesn't. Some of you are old enough, it looks like you can remember when classrooms had one computer and you had to rotate everybody through. Everybody gets 20 minutes on the computer this week. All right, who's up today? I got 5 students today. There's going to be 5 students tomorrow. We just rotate through. That's not fair. That's wonderfully same. Fair refers to equity, not equality. So I tell parents on back to school night, you better pray I'm fair and not pray that I'm equal or same student to student to student. Because that's not even close to what fairness is. But again, an embarrassing story from kindergarten. I'm teaching kindergarten and some kids, the end of a class party, celebration, something, 3 of them came up to me and goes, Mr. Wormeli, you have 9 cookies left? It was like vanilla wafer, ginger snaps. They're small round cookies. I said, you've got like 9 and there's 3 of us. So I got new shoes. and another one says, yeah, and my daddy came in late last night and my mommy was mad. We talked about TMI. What does that stand for? Too much information. You need to. So now back to what we're talking about. So what do you want to ask me? Could we have the 9 cookies? You could just divide them up. And I said this. I cringed to think about it. I'm embarrassed I did this. But here's what I said. What would be fair? I was perpetuating the incorrect understanding of fairness. I didn't know any better. I was a new teacher. I just feel really bad about that. But I should have said, what would be equal? What would be the same for each of you? Because I thought I was teaching math. And they go, well, it could be 1, 2, 3 cookie for me, and 4, 5, 6 for him, and 7, 8, 9 for her. Yeah, could we do that? And, oh, you mean if I have 9 and I divide it among 3 children, that would be 3 for each one. 9 divided by 3. I'm teaching kindergarten math. That's what I'm trying to do. And like, look at me, this is great. But I was really already blowing it. So imagine the doctor's office, and you're in the waiting room. Once again, they're sitting in the front. It just stinks, but I'm going to use them. Anyway, you're in my doctor's office, and I diagnose every single patient out in the waiting room before I invite them in for treatment. And I am world renowned. I am a genius at fixing broken arms. In fact, that's all I do. Oh, here I am in my waiting room. You have COVID. I'm so sorry. It looks like it's long COVID. I saw you just 5 weeks ago. You got a splinter in your eye. How that happens, I really don't know. You've got meningitis. Oh, that's really bad. You've got a broken arm. You've got a broken arm. You've got another splinter in your eye. Is there something going on with splinters in eye? I don't know what's going on. So what do I do to everybody in the room when I call them back? I put a cast on every single person's arm. Who does it serve? These two. But the rest of them, this is absurd. This is just ridiculous. Why would you do that? It's the exact same thing. When teachers in a classroom diagnose kids is very different, then they keep on doing what they were going to do anyway. They don't adjust anything as a result. So diagnosis is one thing, but then uniformity in demand, on timeline, and in what we do, here's the deal. Fairness means I do what's ever developmentally appropriate to maximize their learning. It doesn't mean I do the same thing. So we're going to give lots of examples of that today. But if I do this for them and they get an A, and I do something differently for them and they get an A, are the A's just as legit? Yeah, we're going to talk about that, but that's a real conundrum. Then, I tell kids this, and I tell parents again at back to school night, but basically here's the message. What I care about is you learned it, not you learned it in the same day in the same manner. If you need 5 extra days, if you get 5 days early, that's fine. We're not going to mire you in some kind of uniformity of the timeline. And just as importantly, I really don't care if you take any of my tests, if you do any of my projects, if you do any of my activities, my assessments, my performances that I require of you. I really don't care at all if you do them. What I do care about is you present evidence of your learning. Not that you took a test, but evidence of the standard. By the way, all those tests, all those papers and writings and performances and things, those are really efficient. Those are really easy ways to show the evidence because they're delivery vehicles. That's all they are. They are not the thing I'm actually testing. Unfortunately, I have actually seen people give points for putting your name at the top of the paper because they somehow want to teach, remember your name. Study how you teach kids to remember that stuff, the world of executive function, and you would never knowingly try to falsify a grade on a test again by boosting a grade or lowering a grade based on 10 points for the putting your name at the top. But the idea is this, I'm looking for the evidence on that. I don't give you a grade for taking a test. So in a grade book, I don't write, and I hope you don't, book report 1, book report 2, book report 3. I literally write the standards at the top, is able to analyze how characters change as a result of conflict, understands plot profile, or whatever it might be. And I write that in the dates, and I rally around that, not that you did an activity. Why? Because I'm not grading on compliance and doing stuff. I'm grading on learning. So there are teachers who give me the creeps a little bit, who have actually said this to me. Well, he got a terribly low grade. Why did he get that? Because he didn't do the work. As Clint Eastwood might say, works hard, deserves, got nothing to do with it. What? You could work really hard, and you did not demonstrate the standard. So I don't buffer your grade higher because you worked hard. I report your work hard separately. But the goal is communication. This grade really means what I say. It's what you know about X, Y, and Z, whatever I happen to be teaching. And then maybe a goal could be to find joy and meaning in what they do. That would be an outstanding outcome. So, if you are really thinking about this, Tom Guskey, among others, has some really good questions to consider. And I just want to put this on your radar, that you would sit down and go, what's the information that we want to communicate to mom and dad and to the child when it comes to grades, assessment, all of it? And then, who is that audience? Is it mom and dad? Is it the kid? Is it both? And we might need to adjust it slightly depending on the audience, but then just as important, what's the intended goal? And over again, the thing that has been the greatest gift that led to kids' maturation and real confidence in the field is when teachers decided this. Grading and all of that is about accurate reporting of children's learning. It's about communication. It is never about compensation, reward, validation, affirmation. So grades cannot be considered transactional. If you give me this, I'll give you a 4. If you give me this, I'll give you a 3. We're just exchanging goods. Or the child comes up and goes, yeah, you gave me an F, or 0, whatever it is. And you go, no child, I didn't give you an F, you taught the same school I did. Grades aren't earned. They're not currency. They're accurate communication. So the phrase to remember that is, they're communication, not compensation. Their validation and affirmation will come with new freedoms, rights, privileges granted to the achieved that are denied the not yet achieved. But understand, the grade itself is not a reward. And if you dangle it like that, you are corrupting the entire capacity to make it an accurate communication, no matter what form that might take. So I'm going to ask you to read this little segment here. It's from Tom Guskey in one of his articles. And tell me, would you like to have your own child, if you have children, in this class? I'll give you a moment. I'm hoping you would say, no, I'd be uncomfortable. What we find is teachers who want to sort and select kids through grades and assessments, that whole enterprise, they tend to be the least effective, least well-trained, and the ones who kind of leave the career after like 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 or 5, because you're just not cutting it. So I don't want my child in this class, because you would have to go out of your way to make sure that you had no positive influence on everybody's learning, and the kids were dramatically different from each other so you could see how they stack up against each other. Wait a minute. Would you like your child in this class? I'm hoping you would say yes. I'll give you a moment. Okay? What if every single kid in your class got 100 on everything? What would your reputation be? You'd be considered, you are so easy. Cheating might be happening too. You're so soft. Yet it could be a sign that teaching and learning happen really well. When did we become so suspicious about success? So a bell curve distribution of grades over a course of a class, a few A's, few F's, more B's and D's, and then a whole bunch of C's, a bell curve distribution, is a sign that over half the class did less than desirable, something went terribly wrong. The goal should be straight A's for everyone. Life happens, it won't happen for real in the class usually, but if everybody got an A, that's another celebrational hallelujah. That's great, as long as the A's were really accurate for what was going on. You matched it to the evaluative criteria that you were seeking. This is great. Don't feel bad or guilty that everybody is successful in your class. That's a weird, whacked out notion in the modern era. So when we talk to parents, this is the slide I often use, but also use it with children. So let's take a look, see if you would agree, at least politely right now, that this could be a little bit of a fundamental for us as we move forward. Okay, in 2019, a bunch of us who really do this around the world, we got together and said, we're all using different definitions. I wonder if we could define 3 things that we really, no matter what, that's like standards-based grading and ethical, accurate criteria and reference grading. And I just want to remind you of those. The first one is they report performance based on standards, not the overall discipline. So on a report card, it might say ELA, or English, or whatever it might be, but underneath it, it says reading comprehension, writing proficiency, media literacy, vocabulary acquisition, spelling conventions, and further elements like that. And you get a separate grade for each one. And then you don't mash it up into one grade for ELA. There's no one grade for physics There's no one grade for PE. You get this separate grade down below because less curriculum per symbol makes the symbol more accurate. The more you do a mashup, the less reliable, less useful it is for anything we want to declare about a kid. And then secondly, that when we do achievement, like on a rubric or something, or a scoring sheet, it's with very limited number of categories. So what does that mean? The 100-point scale was never meant to be used to actually report human progress against standards. It's one of the things we ditch as fast as we possibly can in that 3 to 5 year process. So what does it mean? It means that you have to have such a small scale, you can define each level without losing your brain over it. Well, what do you mean? Well, can you imagine if I had you to write out, what does 100 mean compared to 99? So you have to write out the evidence descriptor for something that you teach for what is a 99 score versus what is a 100 score. And then you have to do one for 98. Now it's taking you about an hour and a half to do all that. Then you have to do one for 97. See, each level below has to be a smidgen below that thing that you said above, or what you're eventually going to say for the one below it, but different enough to warrant being its own category, right? Then you're going to find one for 96, and maybe write one for 95. You run out of words that mean subtly different degrees of one another. So we don't do that, and that's within a really spurious margin of error. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. So what does that mean? I had a very famous name who did a pretend rubric. This is the one you shall follow. And the top level was student demonstrated exemplary performance. What was the one below? Student demonstrated outstanding performance. Third one down, student demonstrated excellent performance. I'm well vetted in the field and I'm fumble-lipped trying to define this for children and their parents. So we have very few levels, but you and I have calibrated the evidence for each one of the levels, and they're discernibly different between the one above and below. There's not these subtleties and splitting hairs over what that might be. We're very, very clear. So most schools who get into this, their rubrics, their scoring guides, their proficiency levels, there's like 2 or 3, maybe 4 that they define, and then one level underneath called not yet, or no evidence, or something like that. Not 0 or F. F doesn't mean you didn't learn, it just means there's 0 evidence of learning presented. Very different idea. Then the third one is this. We totally separate all the work habits, character, all that stuff, separate from what you know about the phases of the moon, or whatever it is you happen to be teaching. So what does that mean? Use the quiet indoor voice. Brought your supplies in a timely manner. Got the index cards on the day which I assigned you to get index cards by this day. Practice personal hygiene. The next time, less axe. Whatever it might be. I know it's your big brothers. It's okay. You just don't wear it here. Anyway, whatever it is, we're going through doing that. That's all we're putting up here. Nice, neat notebook is over there. Reading log minutes, band practice minutes is over there. These are all peripheral things. They're actually not part of the evidence of the grade I claim to be reporting. I'm reporting what you know about constellations or how clouds form. Is this cumulus, cumulonimbus? Are you serious? I am. But you're in a fog. Anyway, don't laugh, you just encourage him. Okay. As we go through that, so that's kind of another definition. When people ask you in the grocery store, or maybe there's a news reporter coming to your diocese school, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's for yourself, why would you do this? Why would you switch this kind of grading? These are the rationales that I've come up with. Maybe you would add your own to this list, but if you need a slide, a list of why would you do it, this is why we do it. And we make sure we're doing it, with fidelity and integrity and that sort of thing. Is there anything that you want me to clarify here in the moment? Yeah.
So if your state like something went to what we call everyone not standard, but
Your state curriculum, accreditation?
is that like reading for that?
Oh, yeah. Every building locally, from the state, for your school accreditation to be a license to be able to teach, you'd be given standards. You get to decide locally how are we going to assess them to make sure they were accurately understood. And for the past 2 years, Leanne Nicholson has been working with you guys to break things down from just a generalized standard into what it means. So here's an example. Common Core, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I'm from Virginia. We denied the Common Core because we had our standards of learning, just so you know where I'm coming from. But I will remind you that it might say fact versus opinion. The student understands fact versus opinion, but you guys get to decide what does that really mean for this grade level and this grade level and this grade level. And that's where you get in the nitty-gritty where you negotiate. We'll give an example of that coming up later. You're exactly right. So I'm assuming you guys are okay with this because no other questions push it back. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
My only concern is the effort and grade being separate, how that works.
Well, we're actually going to see that in the next segment. So I might hold you off there. But it does mean there are positive, negative consequences for good scores and negative scores, like there are for academic grades if you do consequences of some sort. But what we find, and I'll just put, this is the shorthand version, when I report a report of your effort separately from the report of your academia, kids mature faster in the effort workouts. They care about it more when it has its own radar. If I mix it in here, what tends to happen is grades are fudged higher or lower based on things not indicative of the evidence they claim to report. Example, I've had a number of teachers in the grade levels below me where I've had to have a talk because the kid got a 75 or 80% at the highest for their mastery. But they counted homework 25 and 30%. And the kid did the homework, but the homework is not indicative of your final mastery, it's just practice time. But you make mistakes and you critique. It's not the final judgment thing. So 25% of the grade, they got an A, that's the homework grade, completion. But they only had this 75 or 80%, but together they made sure they got 100%. And so now they have an A coming into me. And they really were only about 75 or 80. You should just know where I'm coming from. 70s are an F range, or excuse me, Ds. That used to be, 70s were Cs, but now you should know that D is a coward's F to us. The kid fails, you just have the guts to tell him. That's a quote later in your handout. So when a kid has a 75 or an 80, he's pretty close to not passing. It's not satisfactory. So the kid actually got extremely low in performance and understanding, but he got an A in the class. It was falsifying the grade. It was inflating the grade falsely. And what we find is the kids will game the system a lot more. It's about chasing points. Can I change the water in your fish tank? Can I tutor young children? My dad has a total hookup with Purell. I'd give 50 bottles for you by tomorrow. Whatever it is, that's happened in my school. And when you report this stuff separately, the message is much clearer. Check it out. Here's your achievement, right here, and here's your effort. Oh, wow. So you learned at a really high level without putting the effort in. Maybe this is developmentally different for you. Maybe we should boost you up or do something more complex. Usually we get this. Here's your low effort and participation, engagement, doing stuff, and here's your low achievement. Here is your high effort, and here's your high achievement. Usually there's a correlation like that. So if I really want that message to come home, hard work yields achievement, I must give them two separate reports so they can see the effect of one upon the other. And as I said before, they actually care about the effort grades more and doing well in that area. But when it's woven in,